Hi everybody. Today we're going to look at setting up a basic scene in Unreal. I'm sure some of you have seen this before, so if you are a slightly more advanced user, I'm sure you can move on and find another tutorial right now. So let's just take a look at the basic layout of Unreal. Alright, so what we're going to do first is I was messing around with the scene earlier. We're going to start a new scene, and we're going to go to what the default viewport layout is. So a lot of you are going to open up Unreal and see this and be like, oh god, what the heck do I do? And you're going to be a little bit intimidated. I know I was when I first started. But fear not, we're going to kind of tackle those intimidations and get you to set up a basic scene so you can just start messing around on your own. So right now, I like to work in the maximized viewport of the perspective viewport. So what you do to get that way is there's this little maximized viewport button right here. I know on some newer versions I'm using the November 2010 beta. Some newer versions have it located over here, but we're going to use this one. So first of all, let's talk about navigation. If you right click, basically your camera rotates on a pivot wherever you want it to look at. If you then, while still holding down the right mouse button, click the left mouse button, so now we have both of them selected, or both of them held down, you can move up and down and pan to the left and right. If you just hold down the right mouse button, you will move forward and back, and you will rotate left and right. You can just simply, you don't even have to let up from one to transition into the other. So like right now, I'm holding down the left mouse button, and then I'm just going to click the right mouse button, and now it'll do this. So then we have the zoom with the scroll wheel. The scroll wheel, clicking down the scroll wheel doesn't do a whole lot in this view, but it does in other views. Like you can measure things in other views, but not in the 3D viewport. So another way that I like to move around, and I end up doing this a lot, is if you right click, and some of you shooter fans will understand this completely. If you right click, you can use the WASD keys to move around your space. So you use A and D to pan left and right, and then W and S to move forward and backward. So if some of you remember, right click just moves you around like this, and then WASD can move you like this. If you scroll the scroll wheel while you're doing this, you'll end up moving a lot faster. And if you take the scroll wheel back, you'll start moving really, really slow and creeping along. So let's get back over here to our builder brush. And what we'll do is we'll show you how to set up just a simple plane. Right now, I have what's called my BSP brush. It's this little red box. It's always going to be a little red box unless you change the color, and I'm not sure if you can, but why would you? Say we select our box, and we right-click on this cube here under the Brushes tab. This, by default, will be at these settings. Let's just make a flat plane. So we're going to do 2048 by 2048 by 16. And at this point I should probably explain that Unreal works in a Z-up world, so as opposed to Maya, which is a Y-up world. So you'll have X, Y, and Z. So as you can see, by putting 16 into the Z-axis, this is a very flat plane. Now, this is just your builder brush, so it's essentially like your paintbrush. You haven't painted anything yet. To paint something, you use these tools right here, or the volumes tools, and I'll show you that in a second. CSG add is what we're going to do here. So we've added this big plane. And right now I'm just going to demonstrate what the other tools can do really quick. 256, 256, 256. Let's start with that. Let's make sure it's intersecting. Alright. Now if you do CSG subtract, it's going to create a little hole in your level. And you can line all this up with these viewports a little bit better. But that's kind of the basics of BSPs. And the others, I mean, mess around with those, you'll figure it out. So I'm going to undo that, Control Z, because I don't want a hole in my plane. And right now, if I spawn into this level by going to right click, play from here, it's all dark. I know I'm walking around, but I can't see anything because we don't have any lights. There's a few different ways to add lights. The basics are right click, add actor, add point light. That's as simple as it gets, but if I want to do something like an outdoor scene or add spotlights or anything like that, there's a slightly different process to it. So let's delete that spotlight, or that point light, with the delete key. And we're going to go up to the top here and open up our content browser. It's this little black square that has an Unreal logo on it. Or you can hold Control-Shift-F and that will open it up as well. I have mine off screen, so it'll open up if you only have one screen here. What we're going to do is we're going to go to actor classes. Just a quick overview of the content browser. This is where all of your meshes are and whatnot. This is for a scene that I was working on earlier. But you'll see that you have all the Unreal assets will be in here. And we'll talk about those later. So I want you to go to the top here. There's a few tabs here, and you'll figure out what these are over time. But let's go to the Actor Classes tab. And when you open this up, it's probably going to look something like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to expand lights. And then, because I want a directional light, I'm going to go take a dominant directional light, or just a standard one. The dominant directional light is the one that more represents sunlight. You'll see what I mean. You drag it into your scene. You have to select it first and then drag. And I'm going to put this back over to the side again. And what a directional light does is it essentially gives you an even distribution of light throughout your whole level. The light doesn't spread, it doesn't contract, it is just an even distribution, just like the sun acts in real life. I mean, I know it spreads in real life, but realistically here on Earth we're too far away to notice. Okay, so it doesn't matter where in the scene this goes because it's constantly emitting light from some unknown source in an even distribution over the whole scene. So what I like to do at this point is sometimes before you create a light is I like to create an importance volume. The way that Unreal lighting works is it works with bounce lighting. So that's one of the nice things about Unreal is you can get like really good bounce lighting all over your scene. But you've got to tell that light to stop bouncing at some point, especially if you have an open scene like this. So if I just build the lighting right now, it would just take forever. But what we need to do is create a light mass importance volume. So you always want this to be bigger than your scene. So right now I'm going to create a 2048 by 2048 by, actually no, I'm sorry, 3096 by 3096 by 2048 high. So we've got this big old box around our scene. I'll just click build. So again, this is our paintbrush. We haven't built anything with it yet. So let's go over to volumes, and we'll go to light mass importance volume. I know this looks a little bit intimidating with all this stuff, but light mass importance volume is the one that you're probably going to use the most. So let's click on that, and now if we move our builder brush to the side, we have this nice yellow box. This is our light mass importance volume. And if some of you are wondering how I got to this window, just hit F4 or double click on anything to bring up its properties. So we've got our builder brush, we've got light mass importance volume, we've got our scene, we've got a light. now we need some stuff in it. So let's go back to our content browser. Let's click on here, and I'll bring mine over. And let's find something to put in our scene. Let's see. I'm going to move this to the side here. And if some of you are wondering how I did that, it's the Windows button and then the arrow keys. And you can move, back and forth. And I have two screens, so it's moving over to the other screen as well. Alright, so you're probably going to start with this box right here. Here, let me get back to the default settings. Alright, so what you're going to start with is you're not going to know what the hell to do in here. And let me make this bigger here so you can see everything that I'm doing. You're going to end up wanting to hit UDK game here over in the packages side. No, I don't want to restart now. Click on UDK game, and then I would sort up here. Up here you can use to sort different types of assets that you might have, whether it's sound effects or textures, anything like that. But we're gonna click on static meshes. So let's not use some of these assets because they are from a current project that I'm working on. Let's find an Unreal asset. Let's say this guy here. Let's bring this into the scene. Now, there's a few different ways to do this. If you just want a static mesh, which is something that's not going to move around in game, I mean you can still move it in the scene here, but once you build your lighting and you start playing the game, the object will not move. So the basic way is to just drag it into the scene. Just drag it in, bam, there it is. Anything selected is highlighted blue, just if you hadn't noticed that yet. That's one way of doing it. There's a few different ways, and there's ways to create different types of meshes. So if you right click on the ground here, it'll bring this window up. And now, if you didn't have anything selected before, you'll see this, and there won't be a whole lot to do. But if you select a mesh in the content browser and then right click, you're going to have all these new different options. So if we click add static mesh, that is essentially the same as dragging it into your scene. It'll create a static mesh that doesn't move. If we want to do interactive foliage, don't worry about that. Interp actor is an actor that will be able to move in your scene if you animate it using the matinee system. So I might include that in a later tutorial, but right now we're not going to touch that. There's one more, which is the UT rigid body actor. We'll touch on that a little bit because that is a physics actor. I don't think we're going to get into how to use this and how to set it up, but just so you know, that's how you add it to the scene. So let's just drag this back in so we have a static mesh actor here. And we'll drag this back off the screen. A lot of all the translation, rotation, and scale tools for your lights and a lot of the objects that you bring into your scene are all going to be the same. So just use spacebar to toggle through them, and then you can move it around your scene, rotate it, or even scale it. Woo, it's huge now. Actually, I think it's tiny. Let's figure out where it is. Alright, so if you ever lose track of an object scale, just come down here to the bottom, and you see where I am now. Typing in some values here. So this is draw scale numbers. Whatever object you have selected will have different draw scales. Because I selected the floor, it doesn't have a draw scale. But this one is the global draw scale, so if I type in 2, we'll get twice the size, 0.5, half the size, back to 1, and we're back to regular size. The other ones are X, Y, and Z axis. So what we want to do here is we'll get this back to normal. And what I'll do is I'm going to show you the rotation tool. This is the new rotation tool since I believe the September build of Unreal. I tend to like it a lot because it's got markers on it and I can clearly know that I'm going 90 degrees. Some objects you won't know. They won't be as lined up as this, like a rock or something like that. But as you can see, I'm snapping to different rotations, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. Let's go back to translate really quick. As you'll see down here in the bottom right, where my mouse is, there's a few different strange looking numbers here. These are the different snap options. This one here is the toggle grid. You can choose 256, and now whenever I translate my object, it'll snap to 256 degree or 256 unit intervals. Now a cool little shortcut with this is the bracket keys. Just above your enter key on the keyboard, you have the bracket keys, and as you can see, as I hit the left bracket key, my snap goes down, or the right bracket key brings it up, and that's only for translation and grid snapping. So now that I'm back down to 16, I can move at smaller intervals and kind of place this more precisely. You can also turn this on and off with this checkbox here. So if you just want to move it around freely, you can do that as well. So rotation. Rotation snap is it's pretty straightforward. It's rotation snap. You can choose your different intervals. So I mean, if you want to make it 45 degree intervals, you can do that. I prefer to keep it at like 11 or 6. And then scale. I mean, scale you can do 25%, 50%. So each time it'll do another 50% or down 50%. So now that we have our object in the scene, we can build lighting, right? All right. So what you need to do to build lighting is generally I just build all up here on the top here. But if you don't want to rebuild your geometry, which is if you make a change to your BSPs, you're going to want to rebuild geometry. And then one more thing is build lighting here. If you right click on this, or I'm sorry, if you click on this, you'll have some different options for building lighting. When you have a bunch of different possibly levels streaming into one map, or you just want to build the lighting on one static mesh, you can have build only current level and build only selected. Those will be off by default, but because I've been working on a game, they've been on. But yeah, if you like say build only selected, and you have this mesh here selected, it will only build lighting for that mesh. So I mean, if you're moving one mesh in this huge giant level, you don't want to have to rebuild the whole level. You just rebuild that mesh. I mean, before you end up shipping whatever it is or showing whatever it is, you'll build the whole thing. But just for preview purposes, it's good. But I wouldn't worry about that for now. Yep. And then paths. You'll figure these out over time. But just build all. And I'll show you a little bit about swarm. So it's going to say collecting the scene, and your swarm agent will come up. For those of you who don't know, swarm, I'll bring this back up. Swarm is for running this build over multiple PCs. So you could have you could have your network have 4, 5, 100 PCs on it, and whenever you build your scene, some more complex scenes can take a long time. It'll distribute the work over multiple PCs. So it's really handy if you're on a network of some sort. But other than that, it'll build your scene here, and then it'll pop you back to here. And you'll see that it'll say, I don't have a kill Z set. And I'll go over what that is in a second. But right now, there's another thing that we don't have. We don't have something for the player to pop into the scene with. So if I click this little play button up here, it will load, and then it'll give me an error. It couldn't spawn player. I mean, what you can do is you can right click and say play from here, and it'll create a spawn right there, and you can play from here, and now you got your little valve. But you're going to want a player start if you're going to be making a game. So it's in the actor classes under the content browser, but it's also right here. If you right click, add actor, and say add player start. Now, whatever height this is at and whatever like direction that arrow is facing, the player will start. So now if I click this little play button, it'll play in the window and I'll spawn. And there I am. We have our scene. Alright, so that kill Z set that I was mentioning earlier and that it gave me an error about. I mean, it's not going to end the world, but this is what will happen if you fall off your map. You are just going to fall and fall and fall forever. Obviously, if someone's playing your game and they find a glitch in the map and they fall through the map, you don't want them to just fall forever. You want them to be killed at some point so that they can respawn. So you always want it to be bigger than your map, quite a bit bigger, so that they don't just fall past the edge of the kill Z volume. So let's take our builder brush and let's make it 4098. And I usually find it good to keep these in powers of 2. If you hadn't noticed, I was keeping in powers of 2 earlier. Let's just make this 16 tall. So our builder brush is now 4096 by 4096 by 16. Let's go to the translate tool and bring it down below our map. So now it's well below our map, and what we need to do is it's still just a paintbrush, so we'll go back to our volumes, right click, and we'll come down to UT kill Z volume, and we'll click on that. Now we have this little gray box. Now if I go back into our map and I go jump off the edge, it'll kill me and then respawn me right back where the player start is. I think that's about it. If there's anything else, just leave a question or comment, and I'll get back to you. Thanks.